All right, now we're continuing what we began yesterday, Dvar Malchut speech, a series of speeches that the Rebbe gave in 1991. I guess it also went into 1992 as well. Tafshin Nun Beit. And these are especially talking about Mashiach. Now, because Mashiach touches on every detail of the world and improves every detail of the world, so therefore, a lot of subjects are discussed over here. And we can, it's done through the ideas of the Torah portion of the week, because a basic idea that Chabad Hasidut wants to point out, and Hasidut in general does, is that everything that's in the Torah is inside of us. And everything that is in the Torah is, how do you say, demanding something from us. It gives us a whole new, first of all, a demand, but also a power to fill that demand, to change ourselves, to change the world, to be more positive, to be more helpful, to be more honest, to be more dynamic, to be more appreciative of God, other people, the world around us, to try to improve as much as possible everything we can. We have to be dynamic and positive, how they call it, proactive to the world. So the Rebbe said that for that end, for that goal, is God spread the Jews all over the world. Jews are spread out all over the world. I don't know if you know it. This is what I read. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I think it is because I read it in enough places. There was a famous leader in the. Let me just do this. There was a famous. I guess it was a king of England, and he was called Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell. English history is pretty amazing. It's pretty sordid and weird also, but it's pretty amazing. So this guy called Oliver Cromwell. So he took over the king. He became a king, and before him, the Jews had been evicted from who did it? I don't remember. I'll have to look that up. Anyway, in England evicted the Jews. England has a long history of anti-Semitism, but on the other hand, England has a long history of benefiting from the Jews. The Jews have been a big part of English society. And so anyway, they evicted all the Jews. So why am I telling you this? Because there was a Jew called the Menashe Yisrael. And this Menashe Yisrael, he claimed that he went around, this is like, I thought 300 years ago, 400 years ago, and he went around, one second, let me get this. Oh, I'm sorry. He claimed that he even saw the 10 tribes, that he went to the 10 tribes. There was also Eldad Adani, that was it. In any case, so Menashe Yisrael, maybe I'm confusing him with Eldad Adani, but Menashe, that's not the point of the story. Menashe Yisrael went to Oliver Cromwell, and he said, you want Messiah to come, right? And Cromwell was a religious guy. So he said, yes, I do. He said, well, it says in the prophets that the Messiah cannot come until the Jews are scattered all over the world. Right? So I said, okay, that's good. He said, well, they're not scattered all over the world because you won't let them come into England. I said, well, you got a good point. So he rescinded the decree. He let the Jews come back in. Luckily, they did not come back in this time because he died, and the king that came after him, they say, wiped out all the decrees and all the laws that he did, wiped out his memory. They even exhumed his body, and they cut off his head and put it on a pole. Anyway, a whole crazy thing about Oliver Cromwell. But the point is that luckily the Jews did not come back, because if they would have told them not to come back again, because they would have rescinded the Oliver Cromwell's rescinding the prohibition for Jews. He permitted them to come in. If they would have come in, then they would have forbidden it again. Anyway, luckily they didn't, and they let the Jews. Eventually, the Jews came back. The point is that for whatever the story is worth, but that in fact is true. Until the Jews are scattered all over the world, Mashiach is not going to come. Why? So the Rebbe is explaining why. Because the Jews serve God. And if a Jew is in a place and he makes a blessing on the creator of the universe, that he created an apple, so this, in a way, refines the whole entire place. If there wasn't such a place as, Zambia or whatever, and there were no apples in Zambia, this person would not be able to praise God because of this apple, the physical world. And the job of the Jewish people is to reveal God in the physical world. Forget about heaven. Heaven exists, but it's totally secondary. That's what we just finished learning in in Torah Or. So the Jews have to be scattered around the world. Now the Rebbe is explaining why. When the Jews are scattered around the world, so every place in the world can experience a revelation of God in that place by means of a Jew making a blessing or doing a commandment or keeping Shabbat or praying or putting on tefillin, something in that place. And there's long stories. I think I told you a couple stories about the Baal Shem Tov traveling, to these weird places in the middle of nowhere and sending Hasidim sometimes to weird places and weird islands, because in that place where they went to, there had never been a Jew that said a blessing or did a commandment or prayed a prayer or even longed for the land of Israel. There's something Jewish. And that, says the Rebbe, that refines the world. That makes the world into a godly place, a living place, a positive place. So he says, if so, now we can understand how our generation is. Yeah, we did this. I think we did this. We did this. I think we got up to here. Yeah, that's there it goes. Good. So the Rebbe said, now we can see our generation, especially the Jews, are spread out all over the world. And not only are they spread out over the world, but they're having an effect all over the world. And not only are they having an effect on the whole entire world, some places are even being transformed, that those places become places where the Torah is learned and where commandments are done, and where there's even Jewish communities set up in order to do what God wants. Now, it's I think, very important to just remember, I don't think that there's any competition over here as far as, no one else wants to make this physical world a holy place. All of the other religions, their goal is to get you out of here in one piece to go to heaven, right? Or at least get you through the world so that you're not affected too much by the world. That's especially these Eastern religions. Or that you're going to go up into heaven. That's how the Islam and Christianity misinterprets totally what God wants, and they somehow they're twisted around the Torah or whatever they do. But they got somehow or other, they got the thing that you have to go up into heaven. That's the whole purpose of being here and doing our religion. We're going to let you into heaven. And Judaism says, who's talking about going to heaven? Who's talking? Not even that. Well, you're going to go to heaven. Okay, you'll go. I remember I spoke about, there was a bunch of groups. What were they? Were the Amish or something? They came here, and all they wanted to know was going to heaven. How do you get to heaven? What's reward and punishment? What's reward? I was very tempted to make something up because I said they would almost believe anything that I said. Something up. Here's a Jewish guy, that they never talked to a Jew before. If I would have said to them, you'll go to heaven for sure if you drop your religions, I can't say anything like that. I mean, I know the religions are bad, but I haven't got the keys. I don't know if I'm going to go to heaven, and I don't even care. It doesn't make any difference to me one way or the other. The point is to improve this world, and this world can only be improved by the only book that tells you how to improve the world. I don't think there are any other books how to improve the world, except for science and university and things like that. But they're not talking about bringing godliness, the creator, into the creation. But there is a certain, of course, benefit for both of them. And the religion has a benefit that it tells you that there's something above you. You're not God. And science, and they have the advantage that it improves the world. It does things with the world. And Judaism says you have to have both. But the main thing is to improve the world according to the way that God wants. So says the Rebbe, it's already been done. The Jewish people have been scattered around the world, and we have done the job. We've purified the world. The world is purified. Now all that is lacking is just we have to accept it. We have to accept it. There's a joke. I mean, I guess this is not a class for jokes, but I'll tell it anyway. A Shad Khan, he goes to the what is it, Prince, was it Queen Mary or something? He goes to the Princess of England, the daughter of the Queen, and she's not married yet. So this Jewish shadchan, he goes to, he decides he's going to make a shidduch for her, the Princess of England. So he goes to this lady, a rich lady, and she's got a son that's like 50 years old. He's not married. And he's a little bit sort of, dense. He's not 100% too smart. And he's got like, not very good looking. He's overweight and he's slovenly and he's got no sense of humor and everything. So he talks to the lady. He says, lady, what did you say your son gets married to Princess Mary? He says, oh, this is not a Jew. She's not Jewish. She's not Jewish. It's not in the question. Says, yeah, but she'll know you can teach her. We can bring a maid in there. They'll cook kosher food for her. And he says, but I can't do it anyway. He talks to her and talks to her, comes day after day after day. Finally, he convinces this lady and her son, okay, I'm willing to do the shidduch for Princess Mary. He goes outside, satisfied. He says, good. Half of my work is done. Now all I have to do is convince Princess Mary to marry this loser. It's the same thing. God, the Rebbe is saying, the work is done from above. The world is already purified. That's half of the work. Now all I have to do is convince the Jewish people to accept Moshiach. Moshiach is supposed to be here. He's going to fix up the whole world. You have to accept that there's going to be a person that's going to come that's actually going to do it. The world is ready. The world is ready. Half of the shidduch is already made. And therefore, says the Rebbe, according to what we said, according to all the signs, as everything is ready, we are in the final stage of the future redemption. I think we did this also. Okay, we go. So it says everything. Oh, here we are. Everything in the world is what's called klal uprat. Everything in the world is built in a way of generalities and details. And now, that's what we said before, Shlemus Bir Olam, completing the world, Mishtakef, b'miyuchad, especially the Birunim, and how let's see an example of how the world has been completely ready, made completely ready for Mashiach by means of Jews being spread out to that place, France. France, Tzarfat. Back to him. Okay, first of all, we have to understand, we've talked about this before, that France was number one enemy, according to Chabad. France was number one enemy of God. France was the enemy of God, of Mashiach, of perfecting the world, of making the world into a godly, blessed, holy place. France. From France came all these philosophers, and atheism was like the ruling force over there in France. Officially, the ruling force, and actually the ruling force in the world. And one of the big purveyors of this whole business, the one who really started it in a big way, was Napoleon. Napoleon was a tremendously talented, gifted, according to what it seems in Chabad, that he was like a sorcerer. He was a magician. He controlled all these occult powers he had. And he was a big, big atheist. Of course, in those days, the church was powerful. France officially is a Catholic country. He made the separation of church and state. But nevertheless, what really ruled over there, beginning with him, was pure atheism. In other words, your God. You call the shots. Nothing is going to control you. The church won't control you. The kings won't control you. There's going to be liberty, fraternity, and equality. Liberty means you're free. That's it. No more church, no more hell, heaven, no more this. Free. Sort of like this song, this John Lennon song, Imagine, right? No God, no anything, just no money. I had billions of dollars, no money, no this. Everything's going to be communism, ideally, right? Free country. So it says France, that was the big enemy of Judaism. That's what he says. Hector, we have to understand that one of the the signs of the redemption, how do you say how we commemorate of the redemption, the Haftorah, the Shabbat that we just had, remember, of Ovadia. It says, B'mefurash, as it talks about France. Galot ha'echel hazeh mibnei Yisrael ad Tzarfat. He said, the redemption will come even to Tzarfat. That's what it says. Ovadia said it. Ovadia was when it was in the first temple. And in fact, this is like 2,600-700 years ago. It says, Yershu et Arya Negev. They'll take over the cities of the south. The Ad Moshiach then says, Va'olu Moshiach, and the saved ones, the Jewish people, will come from Mount Zion, and they will judge the mountain of Esav, which is basically the church. Then God will rule over the world. We have to understand, from that with the prophet. Mefarid is a galut, that he says that the exile and the redemption is especially reflected by Tzarfat, France. If he was referring to the same place as it is now, I doubt it greatly that France was, maybe it could be, maybe it wasn't, it changed, I don't know. Anyway, France was certainly a country, and this is a prophecy. He's talking about the prophecy. And France is going to be the sign of the future redemption. Moving so it's understood. There must be a big connection between France, Tzarfat, and the future redemption. Shahari, because afilu in the beginning of the exile, the Jewish people were sent to France. Lamai nafkamira, what do we care about this? Leperish zot pasuk, that this is talking about in this sentence, that it's talking about France today. In France, the Jewish people were in France for a long time. They were in France for a long time. Rashi was there. Rashi was like 900 years ago, and he was in France. Judaism had existed in France for a long time before that. Ubafrad, and especially Biyud Sha'osek, is talking about Lo b'tchilas hagalos, not in the beginning of the exile, 2,000 years when the temple was destroyed. We're talking about the Geula. So that what it says, that France is not necessarily talking about Jewish being there after the temple was destroyed and the Jews were scattered all over the world. We're talking about France as it is now in the redemption. That's what it says in the prophecy of Ovadia that we read last week. From this it's understood that the future redemption, Maga Dvar Shehi Nogea, it is relevant. I'm sorry, the thing Shehi Kashura with France. That this beginning of the exile was into France. The Yesh Lomar, we can say that the reason is the Shlemus of Birur, the completion of the world, the purification, the refinement of the world, because you have to remember, God is creating the world. The world is a creation of God. God wants his creation to be good. And in the end, it will be. God will be the ruler. This is by means of refining and elevation of the Jewish people in France. This will be understood by means of the change in the Jewish people in our generation now to France, regarding the previous generations and the time of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. Okay, in the time of the Alter Rebbe, France was number one enemy to the Jews. It's known in the time of the first Rebbe of Chabad, that was like 250 years ago, right? That then there was a big war between Napoleon, the French Napoleon, and the Tsar Alexander the Russian. As the first Rebbe of Chabad, he thought, not like the other leaders of Judaism, he thought that Sarfat, Shelton Matzevam Aruchni, that, I'm sorry, Shalatovat, I'm sorry, the letters are not clear to me. Shalatovat Matzavam, that for the benefit of the spiritual benefit of the Jewish people, as far as fearing God, it's better that Russians should rule the world over France. Russia should rule. Now, France, like I say, everybody liked France. France was modern. He was appreciative of all the different types of peoples. And while on the other hand, the Russian government, it was a monarchy, and he didn't care about anybody. All he cared about was just he should rule, and that's it. And Napoleon said, no, I'm for the people. I want there to be equality. You're going to be equal to me. And everybody said, this is great. Everybody can do their own thing. And religious Jews will be religious. You want to be not religious, be not religious. Napoleon is giving us total freedom. This is wonderful. And everybody wanted Napoleon. And the first Rebbe Chabad said that if that happens, it's going to be a terrible plague on the spirituality of the Jewish people. There won't be any more fear of God. It'll creep in gradually, but it'll happen. And that is basically the biggest enemy of Judaism. The biggest enemy of Judaism is the Jews themselves. If there are enemies from the outside, so we can take a stand. We know that they're against us. But as soon as there's no enemy outside, then there's confusion. Right? We don't know who's a friend. There's no boundaries. And suddenly we start to think, hey, maybe there's no such thing as the Jewish people at all. That was the goal, at least the ideal of Zionism. They thought that we could just get rid of our Judaism and just be a nation. Why? Because as long as there was enemy from the outside, so it was clear that we're Jews. But as soon as we can get rid of this enemy from outside of us, and that there's no pressure, then we'll just dissolve. And that's what the Alter Rebbe was afraid of. He was afraid of Napoleon wanted to take off the pressure of the Jewish people, and then the Jewish people would just intermarry, and that would be the end of the Jewish people. It would be and in order to bring these people back, and even if one Jew intermarried, every Jew was important. So therefore, he said, Im Yenatzech Bonaparte. He said, if Napoleon Bonaparte, he succeeds, he's called Beit Pei, as Yarbe Osher B'Yisrael, the Jewish people become rich, and their glory of the Jewish people will be elevated. Aval Yitpardu V'Yitrachku, but their hearts will be separated from their Father in heaven. The Im Yenatzech, and if Alexander, even though that there will be poverty among the Jewish people, and the Jewish people will be cast down, but the Jewish people, their identity, at least they'll be connected to their Father in heaven. And the reason for this is, but in France, and Napoleon at the head, Yitzagu az tenua shel Rahman Islam b'kolin yinidat, because Napoleon was the champion of atheism and faith in God. Up to Napoleon, that hadn't really been a force in the world. The force in the world was the church, different aspects of the church, different this. But atheism being a movement in the world, it wasn't until Napoleon came. There was certainly atheism, but it wasn't popular. It wasn't, and Napoleon brought it to new heights of success. This is Klipa Shamochas of France. Now, the purpose of the Jewish people in the world, it's not good that the Jewish people should suffer. There's no doubt about it. But the purpose of the Jewish people is not to be rich and not to be comfortable and not to be famous or not to be, receive prizes. Those things are good. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a desirable thing, but that's not our identity. And if that covers over our identity, then the whole world disbenefits, because we're supposed to be here to bring a blessing from God into the world. And Napoleon is saying, if you want to believe that's okay, but it's obviously not so. Here I don't believe in anything, and I'm winning the whole world. So this is something like the Greeks in the time of Hanukkah. Shahaviyata shall tokef klipas adin akasha, because Napoleon, he represented the power of klipa, of concealment of God, and in a very severe way. Machos, because geus vis nasus, because of egotism and selfishness, that a person depends on his own power. Like it says, kochi v'otzim yodi, I created the whole thing myself. Therefore, it will remove the hashgacha ve'amuna bitachon be'elokim. people will stop thinking about God. And that, in a big way, is what's happening now in Israel. It's happening in Israel. People are seeing big, big miracles, and they're seeing that our government, that they thought we could do it all ourselves. We have the army, and we're going to do it ourselves, and we don't need God. We don't need God. And they had a very good point. What do you need? Imagine if the religious people would have come here and made a country. What type of an army? What type of a place would this be? Would it be, there would be streets? Can they really do things? The non-religious people came and said, we're going to do it ourselves. And they did it. They did. They relied on themselves. They didn't say God is going to make the roads and God is going to make the telephones and God will protect us. God, you have to have an army. You have to have this, right? So they did it. All of a sudden, people are seeing that 1 second, we thought it was going to work. Here it didn't work. The army didn't protect us. And the soldiers go in and they realize that, hey, we haven't been really properly prepared. I mean, there's big miracles happening. They're shooting at us and they're missing. Or all of a sudden, their things blow up on themselves. And little by little, the soldiers are starting to realize, hey, maybe this Judaism stuff, it's not really a religion. It doesn't take you out of the world. Exactly the opposite. It enables you to benefit the world. Little by little, people are revealing it. But that's what Napoleon's dream was, that no one would think about God. Everyone would think only about themselves. Like it says, the second Rebbe of Chabad, this was not a temporary thing. It would be relevant to all times and all the generations after that. The Jewish people would have been released from the ghettos and they would have released from the suppression of the church and everything like that. But that release would have been tragic for them. You do it like it's known, but Dvar Yomim is known in the history books, that the French Revolution in Tov Kuf Mem Tet, the French Revolution, when was it, in 17 something? Asher Katot, that from it came Napoleon. Napoleon came, and he was a result of the French Revolution with, what's his name, Robespierre and all that. Ba'avur Mispar Shanim, in a course of a few years, that all of a sudden Napoleon, he was the one that took the helm. And so it was also a revolution against, it was ideological revolution. In the Kalali, it was a big thing that brought with it Shino Ikari Ba'olam Kula, and it brought a change in the whole world. France was like the how do you say, the intellectual inspiration for the whole world. The art and the music and it was Hayasa Mia Ma'orosa Ikarim. This is one of the most important things that the Hushtat Yesod and Nahagas Shala Olam Moderni, what's called the modern world, was really determined by the French Revolution, especially what Napoleon did. It was brought the whole world into a totally new era of thought and values. All of a sudden, the world started valuing what was called tarbut. What do they call it? Culture. Till this very day. Before the Russian Revolution, Memshelet Tzarfat, the government of France, and majority of the countries, they had a king or a queen, and this was according to what the king or the queen wanted. The French Revolution was Shebnei Adam, that people Chavshim will be free to do whatever they wanted. Therefore, they deposed all these kings or the queens in order to free themselves from the rulership. In France, there were always kings. I mean, the kings were debauched. They were terrible. They were Louis. All of them were Louis. Louis the First, Louis the Second, Louis the, just different degrees of decadence. Lower and lower they got to. But at least there was a king. At least there was a king. And Russia tried to sort of copy the way the king, if you went in Russia, they have what's it called? The Hermitage over there, which was supposed to be something like the Palace Versailles in Russia. They tried to copy as much as they can. Everybody was envious of French culture. The whole world was envious of French culture. That was a big thing. And French culture, the emphasis on French culture, this is especially after Napoleon, that everybody would be free. I think even to this day, that's the motto of France or something: liberty, fraternity, equality. I think. The conduct of the country, Napoleon wanted that the country would be ruled by people. tzibur u'miyatzeget anshi medina. They would represent the people of the country. Even though even though there is in this the advantage shemetosef chofesh begashmius, there's a big advantage to what Napoleon wanted, that people will be free and there'll be more justice and people will decide on their own to be honest. Before that, it was everything was in the hand of the king, and the king was like God. And a lot of the kings were terrible people. I mean, they were terrible rulers. Listen, in a way, monarchy is the best system of government if the king is a genuine king, because usually the people, they're the least, how do you say, the least able to be rulers. People, they don't know what decisions to make, the people. So if you put the hand, if you put rulership in the hand of the people have to make their own decisions. So they're not experts in the subject. The people don't know when to make a war, when to make a road, and the people are voting. And the people can vote for people that are not good people. If you have a king, and the king is a genuine king, so the king can go against all the people and say, listen, this is what you think, but I know what's best. And if he really does know what's best, if the king is really, like they say, the chosen by God, so then the people benefit. People have a tremendous benefit. They don't go according to what they want. As we see, like in America today, the whole thing is just falling apart because everybody's doing what they want. Right? You have to have a good ruler, a strong ruler that he, right, says what they're going to. Okay, but if the king is bad, then you really have problems. Then you really have, because you can't get rid of him. You can't vote him out of office. And so in one way, having a king has a big benefit, namely that there's a king and that people realize that they're just people. They're just, they're just citizens. They're not rulers. They're not prepared to be rulers. They have no talent to be rulers. On the other hand, individuality is quashed. There's no question. So Napoleon had this thing about being individual. But Dvar Hashem, the word of God, this brings a Dvar, I'm sorry, and this thing would bring freedom and richness to the Jewish people. The Jewish people would be free to open their businesses, whatever they want to. But McKeevan sins that this would not be founded on any sort of faith in God or trust in God. So this would bring with it, and consequently also, and especially by means of Napoleon, Gisha Chofesh Baruchnis, that people would start to feel that they are God. Chofesh meaning that I don't need anybody to tell me religion. No, I don't need the Torah to tell me what to do. Prekas all of a sudden, what's really wrong with murder? What's really wrong with idolatry? What's wrong with these things? Nothing is wrong. I'll finish the class. I'll get to you, Robert. Dvar sheishpia al kama medinos, and this had an effect on a lot of other countries also, that they became, how do you say, atheistic. And for this reason, the first Rebbe of Chabad was totally against it, and he prayed and even sent spies because on Napoleon, and because the first Rebbe of Chabad refused to listen to be under the rulership of the French, as he actually ran away with all of his family and everything that he had from the city from Liadi, I thought it was Liasne, okay, from Liadi, until in a natural way, as Iroy Achakak, that he passed away. He was in a place called Kfar Piena. So the Alter Rebbe, because he hated Napoleon, that eventually brought about his death. He ran away from Napoleon. Napoleon was conquering Russia, and wherever he conquered, the places he didn't kill people. He wanted the people to be his servants. He ran away from Napoleon, and he promised the second Rebbe of the Middle Rebbe, Ad Kadei Shvua, it was almost like an oath, that Russia is going to win the war. He said, Russia's going to win the war. One second. What's this? Is it a question? Yeah, I'll answer questions. I'll just finish this and I'll answer all the questions. They said Russia's going to win the war. But in the end, they're going to fall. And so it was. By means of that, Nitzlu ben Israel, the Jewish people, were saved from undesirable influences. That says that there was, with this Russian, the Jewish women were, how do you say, the camaraderie, being together with the French soldiers. It was unheard of, right? The Jews in Russia, they all knew about God. And all of a sudden they were changing. And all of a sudden the French, they became God. Sheyota Shel Tzarfat, that because France was conquering Russia and the Jewish people, afterwards they could do Torah and the commandments and serve God, and especially by means of learning Torah and Chassidut in that country, by means of our Rebbes that filled their places. So if so, by means of defeating Napoleon, as that defeated in a big way atheism in the world, and a person could say, so what? What's the big deal? Who cares? Let atheism win. What do you go? Let everybody just do what they want to. And that's what Napoleon said. And the first Rebbe of Chabad said that that's the opposite of what the creator of the world wants. The creator of the world wants that this world should be a good world, but according to the manufacturer's instructions. In other words, there has to be peace, but it has to be based on truth. If peace is not based on truth, it won't be a lasting peace. It won't be a lasting prosperity. And that's what the Alter Rebbe wanted to do in the world. And that's the idea of Mashiach, that everyone in the world will be connected to his creator, that God is creating us, and do according to what the creator wants. And Napoleon wanted exactly the opposite, to be separated. And we see that Napoleon, not only did he lose, we're going to see that the country of France, not only is it not opposing God, but the country of France has been transformed into a place where there's a lot of Torah, a lot of commandments, a lot of Jews are returning to Judaism there. I remember the year when the Rebbe said, I'm going to take the French national anthem and I'm going to put words of and from our prayers to it. And when he did, all of a sudden the next year he said, that's going to break the shell, the klippa of France, and the Rebbe did it. And the next year, all of a sudden, French people started pouring in to 770, non-religious French people. Jews, some of the first time they ever put on a kippah, they didn't. Amazing. The whole thing transformed. And that, says the Rebbe, is one of the big signs that the future redemption is here. And now we'll turn this off and I'll answer questions. 1 second. Well, maybe I'll leave it on. We want to leave it on. Here we go. Raising your hands. How do we do this? What does it mean? You're raising? Oh, here. I have to ask to unmute. I never had this before. So lower hand. Ask to unmute.
Yes.
Oh, you have questions? Yes.
Yes. If my memory is correct, I think it's around in the book of Judges, Shmuel. At that time there was an issue where the people, when the people left Mitzrayim, at a certain point they went to the judges and they wanted a king. And what didn't the prophets then Judge Jen say that a king king may not necessarily be a righteous king, but rather could mistreat them?
No, that's not. No, so like what happened was it's a commandment for the Jewish people to pick a king. It's a commandment. Some tasim alecha melech. It's a commandment in the Torah, one of the 613 commandments. The Jewish people, when they're in Israel, they have to make a king. They have to make a king. So it's a commandment. So what they did, they requested a king. They did a commandment. But God got very angry at them. Why? Because they said, we want a king so we can be like all the other nations. We have a king. Every other nation has a king. We want our king also. And God said to Samuel, the prophet Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And they wanted a king, they wanted to do the right thing, but they wanted it for the wrong reasons. That's the whole point. In a way, that's very relevant to what this is over here with Napoleon. Napoleon himself wanted to be a king. Napoleon had himself crowned as being emperor. Napoleon. He took his brother, whatever, made him the king of Spain, all these other places. He himself made himself a king, but he was going to be a different type of a king. He was going to be a king that let the people do what they wanted to. A different type of a king. To a certain degree, that's what the Jewish people wanted then. They wanted a king in name, that they would have a king above. And he said, listen, you're going to get a king, and if you want the king for that reason, and it could be that the king, in the beginning, it might be great, but eventually that king, you should know what he's going to do. He's going to take taxes from you. He's going to, so it could be an improper thing. that you want the king. And they picked King Shaul HaMelech, that he was a very great person, but he made certain small mistakes. But that's why God got angry at them. But nevertheless, they got a king, and they got a very good king. King Saul was a good king, but he wasn't the ideal king. So to have a king is a good thing. But to have a good thing is a good thing to have a king, but he has to be a proper king. And because he wasn't proper, that's why God got married. He got mad. Okay, answer the question?
Yes.
Good. Now let us continue. Because somebody else had another question. Okay, let's turn this off.
I was going to ask. So I can't find the exact place. I wanted to look it up, but I couldn't find it exactly. But I believe there's